My favorite. It's Judd's Hockey Show.
That's right. The season might be done. Matthew Tkachuk might have played through a broken sternum, but we play through on this show everything and anything because we go all off season long. Judd, Jesse Pierce, of course, from Bar Down Beauties fame, and also she covers the Wild for the NHL.com site. Declan Goff, as always, the co-host as well. And what I have today, ladies and gentlemen, is a crystal ball edition of Judd's Hockey Show. I have questions for you regarding the Wild. But before we get to that, it looks like Jess is up north. And so I'm going to give Jesse some advice right now because this show is brought to you by our friends from Power Lodge and Miller Marine, which is a marriage of, and get this, if you're a Minnesota sports fan, you need this, a marriage of throttle therapy between fun on the land and fun on the water. Pick your power and head to Power Lodge. Now, locations, Brainerd, Onamia, Ramsey, look at that. Miller Marine in St. Cloud, the Bennington right there, outstanding. Temps are up, prices are down. Some of the summer deals happening right now. Bennington Pontoon at $28,888. And for a bonus, the first 8 people that buy a trailer get one for $1888 or finance it all at $288 a month. Whatever you need, we've got it with over 300 pontoons in stock. PowerLodge.com or MillerMarine.com. We appreciate their support. Please support them because that always helps us as well. All right. Are we ready, Jesse? We will start with you. Here we go. The Wild is scheduled to, or is slated to pick 21st in the first round of the draft, which is on June 28th. Crystal ball. Will the Wild, in what is a deep draft, trade up to try and acquire a higher pick?
No, it is. Like you mentioned, Judd, it's a deep draft. I don't hate the idea. And again, I know Bill Guerin, as we've said many times on the show, as he has said to us media, he will always listen and entertain ideas. But this draft class is unreal. Like, it is so deep. It's going to be great. Even in the second round where the Minnesota Wild have a couple extras, they'll be able to get something worthwhile. Again, if something comes across there, you can get up and get Connor Bedard. If Chicago is all of a sudden crazy and wants to do that, sure. But otherwise, no. I mean, you'll still get a very quality player at 21. I'd sit tight because I think it might be pretty expensive if you were to move up.
So I'm all for this. I say you do trade up. I say you absolutely trade up. So you got 3 picks, in the first 56 selections of the draft. So 3 picks in the first 2 rounds. I think there's a better chance that you can get a legitimate impact player that potentially could start not right away, but pretty damn close if you're indeed near the top 10. If they're picking 21 and if they're picking the 2 picks in the second round, odds are one of those guys turns into a capable and solid NHL player. I'd rather mortgage some of those future picks and these picks that are in the second round go up to maybe, I don't know, between 12 and 8. I don't know the exact draft chart. I know the NFL has like draft charts. You can actually plug and play what selections would it take to get you up to a certain number in the draft. But I would entertain moving up. I think they absolutely should. I think it makes more sense to have a guy in an entry-level contract, too, that could potentially contribute right away. Maybe even a center that falls to like 8 or 12. I would entertain this idea.
Be careful. They thought that was going to happen with Marco Rossi, and it is not yet. So I'm sure with both of you on this because 21 in a deep draft is not bad. Like, it's not going to provide, it's not going to provide you most likely a guy who's going to play certainly next season. But in a deep draft, it could get you a valuable player. But, and I guess that this falls with the next question as well. So it's going to dovetail into it. But here's the one thing, Jesse. I wonder if they would consider this based on the fact that I think they want to, and pretty much have to trim at least a veteran out for salary cap purposes. So I guess that's the question is, do we think, and I do we think that they are going to make a trade at the draft to take a current player or two, but at least one cap hit off the roster? And if they do that, would it make sense to try and package, I don't know, a second round pick, that player, the first round pick, to try to go up? You're not going to get in the top 10, in my opinion, but I think you could, like Dex said, probably get around 12 or something like that And the only reason why I think it might be a viable solution is, as far as I can tell from checking out their salary cap conundrums, they need ideally to trim a player off the roster. So how do you go about doing that?
I mean, you're right. And I was very quick to say no. And I only said it because the NHL draft, to me, it's so hard to project where an 18-year-old player is going to be.
You're right.
Ryan Hartman was a first-round draft pick, and look at that's resulted in. He's finally coming into his own. I think with that being said, it's hard to figure out when to move up. Again, this being such a deep class, Fantilli going at number 2 is going to be fantastic, right? Like, I would love to get him. I just think you're right, Judd, in the respect they're going to make trades. Once the Stanley Cup finished the other night, you guys, I was like, all right, phone is on ready, waiting for these emails to come in, because now Billy G is going to start cooking. Because I think they'll be active, but I don't know that it necessarily has to mean for this year, for this draft class. Again, I think at 21, you'll still find somebody. But to me, the NHL draft, you never want to say it's worthless, because look at Matt Boldy. He's accomplished as much as he had that year's draft class. Jack Eichel, you go back to that. But it's just so different. It's not the NFL. It's not somebody that is going to come in and be an impact player. You mentioned Marco Rossi. We're still waiting, and he was a first rounder. So I do think Bill Guerin is likely to do something at the draft. I just don't know that it would result in a move up in the class this year. I think you mentioned veterans, Judd. I know I've said it. I'll say it again. Marcus, I love you, but that's an easy player to move. So it wouldn't surprise me if there is a trade at the draft. I just don't know that Bill Guerin would be wanting a pick back in exchange.
It is interesting because Foligno's the one that we've all been talking about from salary cap purposes, but then there's these weird fringe prospects, and this is where dealing from a position of strength could help out the Wild, and why I think, again, makes more sense potentially for them to move up. Like, if Kalen Addison is indeed blocked, then shop him. They're not going to give up on Marco Rossi yet, but if they were, you could use that as a legit leverage piece again to move up. With them having the best prospect class, and that prospect class expected to have prospects that graduate into the next level, that's where I just think you have a surplus here, right? It's like the Office episode. They have a surplus. What are we going to spend this extra money on? Or is Michael just going to buy himself a fur coat? Like, you can actually do something with this surplus, and I think it involves maybe even trading some of these middling prospects that are blocked a little bit to help you move up in the draft.
All right, question number 3. Actually, now it just got bumped down one, but that's fine. So the team is looking for an assistant coach to replace Brett McLean, who of course took the Iowa job to replace Tim Army with the American Hockey League affiliate in Des Moines that the Wild has. So, Jesse, Bill Guerin told Doogie a couple of days ago in a sit-down that he wants someone with previous head coaching experience. Now, it could be a minor league guy, but he wants a guy who has previous head coaching experience in that role. Is this something or nothing when it comes to the future of and the employment of Dean Evason? Because I mean,
we reckless speculation, right? I'm sure Bill Guerin didn't intend to use those words as he did, and he didn't think that us media would spin it. But yeah, I mean, it certainly helps if you have an assistant on your bench with head coaching experience and you decide you want to make a change. That's an easy move up, right? I mean, I'm sure in Bill Guerin's mind, again, he's probably didn't intend those words to be taken as literally as they were. No. But I don't hate it. I mean, we mentioned at the end of the year a change needs to be made in coaching, and obviously with Dean Evason under contract, you don't want to keep spending money for people that are no longer on your roster, right? And Dean Evason falls in that category. So I'm sure it would help. There are so many coaches out there every single year, right? People are getting fired nonstop that I don't know that necessarily it has to be such a lateral move from assistant to head, but it doesn't hurt. I don't hate the idea. I don't hate the scheme. Again, Billy's probably going to be like, I didn't mean it that way, guys. That's not what I said. Dean Evason is my coach, yada, yada. But it's certainly something interesting to entertain, especially once he does make that hire, who it is. Because then that, I think, picture becomes clear. That crystal ball of yours, Judd, will certainly be clear. Like, okay, yes, that's the guy that could replace Dean.
Yeah, the one I kicked around to Judd, and I have no idea if this guy has good connections with Bill or not, Jess, but it was Dan Bleisma, right, from the former
Oh, yeah.
from the Penguins, who won a cup with them, took them to numerous playoff trips. I think only got one cup with that tenure, but regardless, really good coach that knew what he was doing and had connections to Bill. Again, recklessly speculating, is that the guy? I mean, he's coaching in the AHL for Seattle right now, so like was the head coach last year for the AHL affiliate. He doesn't have an NHL job. I know he's a very cantankerous guy, and I think even Jack Eichel once said, "I will not play for this. I won't re-sign if this guy is still the head coach in Buffalo," which is where he went after Pittsburgh. So I don't know. There's definitely some combustion there, but just piecing things together and knowing what Bill likes and his previous relationships, I wonder if that is indeed a guy who Bill could go after and make the assistant coach and potentially a coach in waiting if a coaching change needs to happen.
And it's interesting that Jack Eichel said that because Dan, USA hockey guy too, where Jack Eichel had him as a young player, Dan coaching World Junior teams. The different, like, I always thought Dan was a great development coach too. Like that's to me what Bill probably is also looking for, considering the next couple of years, right? If he does want to make that change, he needs somebody to help nurture these young guys. Jack Eichel to me is a bit of a diva, so I would take his words with a grain of salt, and I'm hoping that's not it. But I think otherwise Dan would be a great candidate. Dex, great call.
It was intriguing too that, and I'm sure they're friends, but one of Bruce Cassidy's top assistants with the Golden Knights was John Stevens, who's been a long-time coach. I think he's had stints in, I want to say, Philadelphia with the Kings. He might have been in Dallas for a minute as well, at least as an interim coach. And so, yeah, if Bill goes this direction and it's not Jesse and Dex, if it's not a friend of Dean's and he goes in the direction of that guy coached in the league. So like if it's a minor league guy, I think there's more interpretation, although that's what Dean was to Boudreaux. And we all know how that turned out. I just can't help but think. So it's an interesting discussion because sports in this day and age is definitely a different animal than it used to be. And look, I know that executives, GMs, front offices are more involved than ever in the actual in-game implementation, right? Like Rocco doesn't just run the Twins by himself. He gets pregame word on what to do, and there's a philosophical agreement on things, okay? And I think that there's no question that Bill Guerin has input. But the one thing I keep coming back to is, you lose a little bit of your oomph as input guy when the game starts. Like you can still have ideas and things that have been talked about, but I can't help but think that as loyal as Bill seems to be, that Billy has watched the past 2 playoffs, right? Or 3. And, things get away and you can't like call down to the bench. Now, I guess you could go downstairs between periods, but I don't think he does that. So my point is, I can't dismiss that Bill said this based on the fact that there has to be a level of, if nothing else, let's get Dean some help down there. Let's get Dean, like when you won't juggle lines, when you won't, I think we all tend to focus on the goaltending, which I think is probably a pre-planned thing. So that's not like that. That's not just Dean. But when you look at, not juggling lines, when you look at like the power play and things like that, I wonder if that's where Bill's frustration lies. Because, I mean, in watching those playoff games on TV and from the press box, there are some head scratcher non-moves while everybody else is making moves. So, like, could this be the first step to say, Dean, we're at least going to get you help here? Because it's almost like Dean gets mentally tied up and he gets so intense. So that's the only thing I can think of why what Bill said actually is something. It doesn't mean that he's done with Dean, but it definitely means there might be a pivot in how things go, especially during key games.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Bruce Cassidy. Obviously, he did a tremendous job moving lines around to equate, and that's why Vegas did what they did as quickly as they did in the finals. And it's funny because you look at what he did the same thing in Boston. It's still crazy to me that Boston was like, "See ya, out the door you go." It's probably there's some legs to it, right? Like to have that assistant that can be as vocal. The thing that kills me with Dean so often, and Judd and Dex, you could attest to this because you're in the room post game, is his lack sometimes of control. It seems that Dean sometimes does not want to go in and talk to the guys. So is that an assistant's job? Is that somebody to go in and like shake them up, rile them up? Because it can't just be the captains. It really, especially when your captain, God bless him, is Jared Spurgeon. That's not going to get the guys going. You need a player's coach, but also one that's not quite a full player's coach, if that makes any sense, right? Like Bruce didn't work out because you had the players not responding to him. Now, Dean almost seems too passive. So there's got to be some sort of in between there. And they're out there. I would love to gamble and try somebody new that hasn't maybe been on an NHL bench before. You know, you see the same recycled coaches over and over again. You know, give Jessie Pierce a call. Maybe she's ready for the call up. Who knows?
No, I'm totally with you. It's in fact, the Flames just hired a guy I've never heard of, and I'm like, hallelujah! Yeah. It's finally a guy I haven't heard. I mean, Peter Laviolette going back to the Rangers. What is going on here? You know, what are we're talking about? Well, Gerard Gallant could end up in Calgary, and he didn't. But you know, yes, I am so prepared for. And look, you know what? In the case of what Chuck Fletcher did with the Wild, it didn't necessarily work, especially when he made Todd Richards his first hire. But you're right, Jesse. It is sometimes it's mind-numbing how much we go back to Laviolette's available. And he just got fired by Washington. How many teams does he coach? Washington, Philadelphia, Carolina, you know, it drives you absolutely nuts. So I think I object less to a fresh face than a recycled one at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just it gets old. I mean, for God's sakes, what is Peter DeBoer once he gets like bounced out of the Stars? Is he gonna then resurface somewhere for like the fourth time in 7 years? It's just, yeah, I'd rather see them take chances on guys like Chicago hired Luke Johnson last year. I believe he had 0 NHL coaching experience either.
Richardson.
So like, you should finally start doing that a little bit. I know Dave Hackstall had a little gap there from college hockey, obviously to the Flyers, and now he's with Seattle and stuff. But yeah, just hire guys that actually haven't do it. Not like Gerard Gallant, like getting his 7th cup of coffee with the Rangers or something else again. It's infuriating to watch.
Well, and the Avs hired Bednar, and that was a gamble, right? Like he was a relatively unknown coach. It seems to work out. You know, it's go young, go younger, have these guys relate, have something a little bit different. I know Patrick Waugh said he wouldn't get into coaching, but I don't hate that idea either. Like I think guys would respond.
Well, I think he wants to now.
Like that. Does he now? He changed his mind?
Yes, he's changed his mind. Jeez. He is a very volatile human being, Jesse.
Yes. I've witnessed that. Yes, absolutely.
And Dean, you know what? Dean was a first-time coach in the league because he had obviously been at Milwaukee, which was Nashville's affiliate. And I think Dean was somewhat akin to what Bednar was, right? Because Bednar was, if I'm not mistaken, with the Avs AHL affiliate. So, yeah, I also think that when you look at the playoffs, and I mean, my God, we saw guys coach their asses off in the playoffs. And then you say, okay, what has the Wild done that there at least has to be a discussion? And if nothing else, if Bill wants to keep Dean, which he clearly does, I think it makes a lot of sense to go out and get an assistant who can at least assist in ideas, especially in the playoffs. All right, next question. Who has more of an impact? The answer is going to seem obvious at first, but think about this one.
Did we lose Judd?
I think so.
Judd Lake.
It's a great freeze frame for him.
Judd Lake. I think we lost Judd. I wonder who he was going to say there. Here, I want to put Judd in timeout as he figures out his internet there. Jess.
Sounds good.
So let me potentially guess here what he was going to say. Was he going? Wait, hold on. Now he's back. Judd Lee, are you back?
Yep, I just got a note from Phil that there are problems, that this is not an individual problem, that there are internet problems.
Oh, so no. Anyway, the gremlins are out, so we apologize for them.
My question, if you can hear me now, was who's going to have more of an impact on the 23-24 Wild, Marco Rossi or Brock Faber?
Ooh, that's a good one.
It seems obvious at first, but the more I thought about it, the more I became intrigued.
As someone who's a betting guy and even also into the investment game, I feel like the safe option is Brock Faber, right? Just a solid, reliable defenseman. Not going to be too volatile, not going to get too high, not going to get too low. You can, put that money in your bond account and just watch it steadily and be okay there. Rossi's more the stock. Like you might have you might have a high payday, but you might tank your entire investment in a few months, and then all of a sudden you are completely out on it. So, I mean, and that also goes to say defensemen versus forwards in the NHL. That is definitely a thing too, where defensemen are always a little safer bets than forwards are. So I would probably say Faber is safer, and Marco Rossi has the bigger chance if he hits the ceiling, of course, to make a bigger outcome.
But answer the question in your crystal ball: who has more impact? I agree completely with your point.
Faber.
Who has
Faber?
Yeah.
Okay.
Faber.
He'll be Minnesota vanilla, but he'll be reliable. He will be consistent, right? It's a Joe Mauer thing. Like, you're just there. They are. They're gonna be there. But you know what you're gonna get out of them. Marco Rossi, it's his to lose again, though. Like, we have this conversation every preseason for the past couple of years. He has a spot. He needs to take it, and I agree with Dex completely. Mm-hmm. He could have tremendous upside, or it's going to suck. And then you lose all collateral with Marco too. If he doesn't perform well in those first couple weeks, knowing how much you need to rely on him, knowing how desperately as the Minnesota Wild need a number one center, if his collateral is blown, then what? Now you're just stuck and you're kind of a middling team once again. So Faber, agreed, is the safe bet. Marco Rossi will have the bigger impact, though.
I agree completely. Faber is going to be solid, and he's going to do his job. Marco Rossi is going to break out finally, because you know what? They're finally going to give him a chance too. They are in a perfect position to give these guys a chance. Like, are we really going to see them bang the wall down again to play the vets and let's try to make the playoffs? And at some point in time, here's my guess. At some point, there is going to be the opportunity for Judd Brackett to prevail and say, we got to give these guys a chance. Like, you didn't hire me you didn't hire me to go get Ryan Reeves. You didn't hire me to take the security of Marcus Foligno. You hired me and he's done a great job. There's no question. Voted the top system by The Athletic, right? This past season, you hired me to bring an influx of talent into an organization that was barren. And so I think Rossi actually has a bigger impact, because I think they're finally going to actually turn a corner, even if it means missing the playoffs. It is the ideal time to give these guys a chance. And for everyone out there who right now is going to say, well, how are you going to explain that to Kirill? How are you going to explain his contract's going to run out? He's going to go to the Rangers. He's going to go somewhere else. Here's how I'll explain it. You think Kirill Kaprizov has had a lot of fun being bounced out in the first round the last 2 years? The only way to get this right, the only way that this team is going to get to where they want to go, is to get the talent into the system and up to the Wild. So I think it's going to be Rossi, because I think he's either going to make a big impact or flame out completely, and it's going to be ugly. And I'm going to go with the positive, because I'm Judd Zolgad. I'm going with the good. I'm going with the Friday positive spin. Rossi has the bigger impact.
And see, I'm going to counter it. My crystal ball says I will call Marco Rossi a bust by January.
Ooh, I like it.
And you might be right. I guess I get why these guys have not played in some cases, but I'm a little bit frustrated that the farm system has been replenished so much. And I feel like you need to give these guys a chance. That's not the fourth line on a Wednesday night in Winnipeg.
Or trade them and move up in the damn draft.
Oh, no, you might be right. Well, if you think Rossi is a bust, trade him now. Because if you bring him to market, if you play him 50 games here and it sucks, that value, to your point about the stock market, Dex, that stock is just plummeted now. So you're right. If quietly you say we blew the 9th pick in that draft, and if you did, shame on you. But if you blew the 9th pick in that draft, Declan, you're not wrong. I agree completely. You need to unload him quick. Now, the question is, has he gotten a sufficient opportunity to show that when he succeeded at every level, but here, and every time something goes wrong here, everyone bails and is like, he's got to go to Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
If he goes to Iowa next year, Jesse, though, you nailed it. He's a bust.
Yeah. This is the year that you can finally decide. Like, this is like, I have not called Marco Rossi a bust at all, because you're right, Judd. He hasn't been given the opportunity, and we haven't seen enough of him to declare that. This is the year, though. This is absolutely the year that you get to make that call, that you can definitively say this panned out, this didn't pan out.
Outstanding stuff, Jesse. Thank you. I think we are done here, Declan. So take us home.
Yeah, hit that subscribe button. Daily Minnesota Sports Entertainment right here on SKOR North. This is Judd's Hockey Show. Yes, we are still kicking this can around every week right here on the SKOR North apps, SKOR North YouTube page, Apple, Spotify. Hit that subscribe button and pass, shoot, score.